go live. Hello and welcome to Live at Epiphan. It is 3 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. So as usual, we are here at Epiphan, but not the Epiphan studio today. We're kind of in an open space here in the Epiphan offices, and we have Dan and Phil having a good time playing some table tennis.
One more round.
I got distracted and I forgot who's winning. But we have a great show today that we wanted to talk about traveling with gear. Some of it will involve how we're packaging up gear for different trade shows, but also maybe for the smaller scale productions, and how you might want to look at different case types to set up with your different gear. So, welcome guys, welcome Phil, all the way from our Palo Alto office in California, here in Ottawa for a little while to check things out and hang out with us. I'm looking at comments on my phone, so please, questions, comments, all that stuff. Make sure that we are looking at all of that. So what's going on, guys? What's
Yeah, so we thought, this is a topic that I think is very relevant to anyone who's ever done video production. You're not always in your home base. You're not always in your studio. Very often you need to get out there on the road. You need to go to where the action is. You need to go where things are happening. Yeah. And that usually means you need to bring your equipment with you. So, traveling with gear is a huge part of video production, yeah. And we thought we could talk about that a little bit today, some of the best practices. We could look at some cases and some ways of...
And share our experience, what we've learned, what works, what doesn't. We've tried a lot of different things over the years.
Yeah.
But
now, first there's a couple little news things we wanted to point out. We do have our Epiphan webinar coming up on July 11th. What was that about again, George?
How to set up the foolproof live streaming studio. And so we've got a sign up page ready for people to sign up for that webinar.
Yeah, I think if you just go to the Epiphan website, you're going to find a pop-up right there inviting you to sign up and register for the webinar. So July 11th.
Good list of people joining. So please join us for that. We're going to talk about all things studio and what setups work, sharing some of our experiences and some ideas and concepts, and go over all of that. So, yeah.
But sort of going back to our topic of travel, Phil and I were actually doing a little bit of train travel yesterday with some equipment, and we got a chance to sort of prep some cases and some gear to hop on a train and go visit a customer down in Toronto. So Phil, maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about how that went, how we packed our equipment, and what we used.
Yeah, so it was a really, really great trip. We took our Pearl 2 in our Pelican case. What else we had? We had a tote bag. I guess that's...
Yeah, well, we got that one. I think you took that one yesterday.
Yeah, we had an equipment backpack. This is actually a backpack. What is this? It's called a Venique. And this is a cool backpack, actually, because it has a camera pouch. It's got lots of room for accessories, side panels. We'll get into showing some of this equipment probably in a minute and sort of comparing. But we had our backpacks. We had a tote bag for all of our cables. And, with just the two of us, it was easy enough to, go handheld with the gear we were carrying and make sure that we, could get everything there and back. So,
I'm gonna just we got a lot of guys in chat saying hi.
Hey guys.
Hi, hey. Emigrav, Scott Burrow, Jet Junkies, Stefan, Daniel Wright. Hello to everyone. It sounds like Jet Junkies have already commented. I use a camera bag rucksack.
Oh, a rucksack. There you go.
That's a great, similar to this. I probably, and I use like a sling one myself for my DSLR because it depends on what you have. There's a bunch of different stuff. We're gonna kind of go over that.
Maybe we could start by sort of talking about, what do you put your equipment in? Why do you choose whether it's a case or a bag? How do you make those decisions? So with Pearl 2, we've got the Pelican case. Is this a Pelican case? I guess it's not
a
from...
Pelican branded case, no. It's a Pelican style case. We ship the portable version of Pearl 2 in these from the factory because we recognize that customers are going to use Pearl 2s in the field. They're going to drag it around, and obviously when you have an expensive piece of kit, you want to protect it. So giving you a hard, rugged, waterproof case with custom cut foam means that, as we've done many times, you can beat this thing up and it's going to be perfectly fine.
When you have a hard case, I guess from my perspective, when it comes to hard cases, nothing's going to protect your gear better than a hard case with custom cut foam, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's shaped, it's designed to fit properly, it's tested. In our case with our Pearl products, we do drop testing with these cases.
We do vibration for high-level truck. We do drop test for heights for shipping, and we do that in these cases so that we know the density of the foam, the thickness of the foam, and all those pieces are what's necessary for the weight of the product to make sure it's protected.
Another thing that's nice with a hard shell case like this, like I don't think that this would be, submersible waterproof. But in the rain,
to a certain depth, it is.
Sounds like a live show.
Yeah.
To a certain depth, it absolutely is. The manufacturer has a rating for that. And Stefan's just saying there, waterproof is very important. Absolutely. He was also saying boxes or trolley with wheels is a good way to transport stuff. And that's a great point. And that's sort of another way to look at things.
Oh, yeah.
Cases like this, you can go slightly larger. Actually, this is the same manufacturer. They make a bigger version of that style case that has wheels on it. This one we just purchased, and we're going to be using it for some of our trade show gear. This is actually a great piece because it is airline carry-on size.
Okay.
So you can use this as a rolling carry-on bag, on an airline, which that can be super important thing to consider. Now, you were talking earlier, Dan, about the difference between going with something hard like this or like this versus a soft bag. I mean, the capacity total between this and your bag is pretty similar.
Very similar, but I would say the human capacity of hard cases versus small cases, there is a difference. So if I'm doing like a local shoot that's maybe somewhere that I'm hopping in a car, I might choose soft cases instead of hard cases. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, with soft cases, they're a lot easier to sling over your shoulder. We've got a tripod case here.
That's one of the most annoying things to carry, and a soft case for a tripod is a great option.
The great thing with the soft case is you can sling it over your shoulder. Now I'm carrying all my camera equipment, my tripod, and my hands are still free. Right. So I can still carry another hard case. I can still carry, Phil, why don't you grab me this camera bag over here?
Yeah, that one's our big camera bag that we use for
this
the
thing,
C100.
This thing is a great camera bag, and this will actually just barely fit in carry-on. You can fit it in your overhead. You can fit it under the airplane seat in front of you. And again, I now have a camera bag, another camera bag and I still have my arms free.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you're just a walking, talking studio.
Now, conversely, if I wanted to take 3 pieces of kit in hard cases, got 1 hard case, 2 hard case. Now what do I do? Right? So my hands are full. I can't do anything else.
Can't open a door.
I can't open a door. I'm going to need
punch
some help.
elevator buttons.
So this is where the difference between hard cases and soft cases, I think, really applies, is just in the amount that you can carry as a person. Now, are the protective qualities of a soft case going to be as good?
No.
Absolutely not, right?
And that's why I would argue if we're talking about shipping a product, and again, that's one of the reasons why we ship Pearl 2 in these, if we're talking about shipping a product, everybody has an experience with a courier somewhere in the world who has drop-kicked a piece of a box or something off the back of a truck, right? It happens. If it's going on an airplane, if it's going in checked baggage, things are going to get beat up. Actually, this is a box we haven't even opened yet that just came back from Infocom. Luckily, this box only contains some of our brochures and printed materials, but this is a great example of what happens when you ship things in just a cardboard box. This box is totally split apart. If this had Pearl 2 with foam inside of it, not only would it probably have gotten soaking wet in the rain, which would have soaked through the cardboard anyways, but busted this out, who knows what could have happened.
Exactly, yeah.
But instead, we ship them in this, and it's going to get beat up and be totally fine.
Yeah.
And so that's an important distinction when looking at how to ship gear in those different ways.
I think it also depends on, how are you traveling? If you're traveling by airplane and you're planning to check equipment in,
hard is
definitely you need to go. You
mandatory.
need a hard case, right?
You can't.
I wouldn't even recommend like a tripod case like this. if you put your tripod in here and then you check it and in the oversized luggage, it's going to have a pretty good chance of getting damaged, and I've seen that happen. So, you know, when you're traveling with a tripod, you probably want to get a hard case for that as well. So oftentimes you're kind of making that judgment call of whether you can just take your gear on carry-on, and something like a nice soft camera bag that's big is perfect for carry-on. And if you can fit your kit in a bag like this, it's going to be that much easier for you when you're going through the airport.
It's also perfect for leaving at security, right, Dan?
Yeah, well, actually, we wanted to talk about some anecdotes and some of the pitfalls of traveling with gear. And certainly, when you're doing air travel, there's all kinds of considerations. You know, like George just mentioned, there are situations where maybe you're at security. When you're unloading you know, 3 or 4 carried bags.
You've been traveling all day, you're exhausted, you just changed time zones like 6 hours. You know, you're passing through there, you've just had a guy touch you in all kinds of places. You know, you don't, sometimes things slip your mind.
Absolutely. Well, you're actually bringing up a point. So we were over in Europe, and on the way back, it was super busy at the Schiphol airport in Amsterdam, and going through security, I had a few different bags with me, and I actually left the camera bag at security, realized it while we were boarding the plane, deboarded the plane, which is more complicated than you think, ran back, couldn't get back to the security checkpoint. So what I ended up having to do was actually calling the airport, and they have a lost and found service, and they were able to locate the bag the next day. But
there was about $7,000 worth of gear.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to be. So that brings up an interesting point. I think it's really important when you're traveling with gear is to make sure your gear is labeled, and that's going to give, if you do have an incident where you're at an airport and something gets left behind, at least there's a way for someone to find whose gear this is when it's lost and found. So
even when it's carry-on, then that's an important thing. Is that you should always have your bags, even if they're carry-on, tagged so that people can locate.
Yeah, another thing that I do is I always just make sure I've got business cards
in the
bag.
Yeah, I put them in all the pockets.
Double benefit. If you need to give someone a business card, you have it. But if someone needs to find out whose bag this is, they're going to call. That's the first number they're going to call, right?
I do that. I put them in all the pockets of my bags when I'm traveling. Stefan makes a great point here when coming back to shipping. You know, if you're going to ship, you got to make sure it's insured, and that's an important thing. Unfortunately, though, sometimes, and I know this from experience as well, even when you shell out a lot of money for insurance, getting paid out from insurance is not easy. And oftentimes, and I've run into this in a previous career, if the item wasn't packed to the specification of the carrier, they can deny that insurance claim. A hard case is always going to meet that.
Oh, absolutely,
right? Because they can't deny that this is practically indestructible. And so even if it was to get damaged, your chances, or lost or stolen, your chances of getting a claim are going to improve when you have a better case.
Good point bringing up insurance, though. I mean, if you do have a significant amount of kit, you should probably have insurance on your kit regardless, right? And especially if you're traveling to other countries. You know, I have friends who've had horrible things where, you know, a red cam gets stolen or something. And you know, that can, you know, have a pretty significant impact on your business or on your life. So just having your gear insured is huge. But there's some other things when you're traveling as well. You know, in terms of actually crossing borders with equipment, sometimes there are some considerations about how much gear you can bring with you across the border. When you start to have commercial, or you start to have equipment valued in excess of perhaps like $10,000 with you, you may need to get something called a carnet. And a carnet is actually a bond that you pay. They take serial numbers off of every single battery and lens in your camera bag, and then you get it stamped when you leave. When you enter the foreign country, they're going to stamp your carnet, and basically what you're proving is that you're not traveling. You're not importing commercial goods and selling it in the destination country. And then when you come back, you of course need to prove that you still have the equipment with you. Now, the plus with a carnet is you can bring an unlimited amount of gear with a carnet. The negatives are you have to pay a bond that you might not get back for a year, and obviously just the hassle and slowdown of filling out paperwork and forms and getting the carnet stamped. It's a lot of effort.
Like you said, that starts to really kick in once you're in that value range of commercial products. And so you need to consider for yourself, you know, if you have $11,000 worth of gear, is it worth bringing, or is it maybe better to just rent locally when you get there, which can save you the shipping costs, the carnet cost, the bond cost, all these other things. You know, that's a consideration. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. That's just a personal thing you have to look at.
Yeah, I think there's a budget consideration as well. I mean, if you have equipment, it's nice to be able to use it rather than having to rent, right?
Well, exactly.
But some of the advantages to renting, though, like when you show up, it's nice to you know, just be breezing through the airport without having to lug everything with you. You pay for baggage.
Yep.
You know, if you're checking a tripod, that could cost you $50.
Yep.
You can rent a tripod for $50 a day. So at what point does it become smarter idea to just rent gear on location in the destination you're traveling to?
So for a lot of our shows, when we go to the trade shows like Infocom and stuff like that, and Phil was there during our setup for Infocom this year, for his first sort of initial setup during a trade show. He's been to others, but he kind of saw the early days and the chaos that is a convention center before it's completed. We ship most of our gear for a lot of reasons, one of which is when you fly, you get asked about commercial goods. And so there's always, with trade shows, that can sometimes be a gray area, so you want to be careful about that. So I thought maybe we would look at some of the kit that we use to ship our equipment beyond just obviously Pearl 2 in its own case. So we wanted to look at some examples of things. We looked at that other rolling bag. We actually use those and ship those. We have a bigger version that we ship some stuff in. But we have a lot of different case samples here, so we thought we'd maybe take a look at some of those. And
Phil, why don't you show us some of these cases?
You might need help
Bring up this
pulling
one,
that
yeah.
one up.
You want to help me with
Oh,
this?
this is a two-person job.
Yeah,
over here.
so
Okay.
any of you who have joined us in our booth at one of our trade shows will have seen these cases. This is basically a hard, rugged case on steroids for rack mount equipment. So it's shock mounted. The inner frame, there are these rubber shock mounts inside, so it has a little bit of flex so that when the courier drops it off the tailgate of his truck, which I guarantee has happened to this case on multiple occasions, everything comes out fine. We do pack the inside a little bit as well. You can see that we ship it with Pearl 2 twin rack mounts installed, a bunch of other kit in the bottom, computers and stuff like that that's all mounted on a shelf. We ship it just like this. We do put a cardboard sleeve on it just to help protect it a little more, but the main impact protection is this case itself. These, yeah, these are not terribly expensive cases at all. I believe this size, which is an 8U, I think. I think this is the 8U size. Is about $500 or $600. It's not a huge expense when you're talking about protecting tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and is well worth it. So that's one example.
Do we have another big case we could show?
Yeah. Well, let's look at a flip side to this style of case.
Okay.
This actually comes from one of our customers. So let's take this guy out of the way.
Sure.
And I'll grab the other one here. And the other way you could do it is with the very traditional flight case. Again, extremely durable. You know, there's a lot you can do with these. Again, this is actually from one of our customers who uses the Pearl system. So they have the rugged flight case. It's got foam on the inside, and then on the inside they have a rack with their actual gear on the inside. Now they've custom built some of this to fit their precise needs, but this company ships many of these kits all over the place on a daily basis, so they know something about protecting gear, and this is what they've chosen to do. Drawbacks to the big flight cases like this is weight. This weighs basically the same amount as that big case we had up earlier, even though it's, you know, a half the size kind of thing. So there are some downsides to doing it. However, flight cases like this, especially if you're going to fly with them or put them on pallets or things like that, these are a great option.
The other thing with these is they're designed to stack,
Yes.
right? So putting these on top of each other, these can even come in useful when you're at the shoot. Sometimes you need something that's just like an elevation, you know, get something up a bit higher. The case itself can be useful for more than just, protecting the equipment.
Durability-wise, I think this is the peak. This is the Rolls Royce for durability.
Well, this looks like a road case from a musical act or something.
Yeah.
A guitar,
Exactly.
protecting musical equipment or something like that as well.
We took some of these off, but this is a different color, basically the same model we use for Pearl 2. So maybe you just have a random collection of stuff. But there's lots of sizes of these, right? So depending on what you're trying to carry, this one is my personal favorite. And it's kind of the right size for a lot of smaller gear. So there's different depths to some of these, depending on what it is that you're putting in it, different sizes. All of these can very easily go into outer cardboard boxes to maybe put a few of them together. But having them individual helps you sort the gear and protect the gear without getting too crazy. So we'll often take something like this and just fill it with all our cables.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've talked a lot about protecting gear, but when it comes to traveling with equipment, I think there's a few other considerations as well. One of them is making it easier on yourself when you're at your shoot.
Yeah.
Now, one tip that I would give to anyone is to make sure that when you're traveling with your gear that you back up and you protect your data as well, okay? I'll give you one example. A couple of years ago, I was on Wall Street shooting some interviews with some CEOs and sort of bigwig on Wall Street, and long story short, our interview went long, and I had to rush to make it to the airport. I barely made it, but in my haste to get to the airport, I threw all my equipment in my suitcase, whereas usually I would pack, my audio gear in my backpack.
Right.
And what ended up happening was, because I barely made my flight, my bag didn't make it on the plane. So now I have, $10,000 to $15,000 worth of video data on a memory card that was packed into a suitcase, which is now lost. And it was a few days of sweating and worrying that my bag might not arrive, hoping that data would come back to me. So I learned that lesson a while back, is always make sure that don't leave your memory cards in your checked luggage. Bring them with you. Put them in your backpack. Keep them on your person. Back them up before you travel. Another cool thing I just wanted to share, I actually saw this at NAB, and this is a company called Narbox, and they actually launched on Kickstarter, and what it is it's actually a small computer device that actually does a hard drive backup to an NVMe hard drive. So all you have to do is pack your cards or put your cards into this device, and without even having to do anything, it just backs them up to that hard drive immediately. So
it's always better to have things in multiple places.
Yeah, exactly. And this thing's like waterproof and shockproof. Just an idea is to always find ways to improve your data backup workflow for when you're traveling as well. It's going to ease your mind when you're on your way back from your production.
Now, if you do have a huge amount of stuff to ship, the other thing you can do is use these very big cases. This is from a company called Gator. They make bigger versions of this as well. Believe it or not, this thing actually has wheels on it. So we have dragged these around many convention center floors to and from shipping. You can fit a lot of stuff in this. This even still has labels from the last time it was used that it was packed with 100 pounds worth of gear, and foam protection and everything like that. Again, these can go great on a pallet. If you're going to ship, you could put a couple of these side by side on a single pallet. It depends on the scale of the operation, but you can pack a lot in here. Like you might be able to
fit a person in here.
A small person, yeah. But you could have one of these. And again, these are fairly inexpensive. These ones are not considered really waterproof the way some of the others are. They are water resistant though. But you could have one of these and pack most of your kit in here and just use this as oversized baggage at the airport and be pretty confident that it's going to make it. I will warn, I guess, one thing we saw, the rack we had earlier that we use, we had an earlier generation rack that we used to bring around, and it used latches similar to this guy, but they were more on the surface. And what happened in shipping once was it got banged around a little bit, and some of the latches actually got sheared off the case. So when we received the stuff, the side panels were half off. The whole thing was bent because those clips often form some of the structural rigidity of it. So tip there is, like this case and like the other rack case, make sure that latches are recessed and not on the surface, because you want to make sure that that part is going to be protected. So I'm going to look through some of the questions here. What other sort of tips have you experienced in terms of, and Phil, what did you learn in terms of how things show up or sometimes don't show up to something like a trade show?
Yeah, I mean, you can never really be too sure whether your stuff is going to get there or not. And, you know, we're always kind of like biting our nails, waiting for something to go wrong, because often does in a trade show. This year was really good, though. I don't think we had anything really, no major hiccups at all. Setup went really well.
No, not at Infocom.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, back in February at ISC in Amsterdam, our shipping stuff got tied up in customs and wasn't cleared by the carrier, and they were blaming somebody else, and there's this whole back and forth game. We didn't get all of our kit until 15 minutes before the show opened, and that's a worst case scenario. And so making sure you ship things with enough time if you are shipping, or any vital equipment, if you can carry it, like Dan was saying, carry it, and you know, cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Now, in terms of like getting things through customs, is there any tips that you could share, George? I know you've worked on that many times.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously changes based on country. Shipping from Canada to the US or to Europe, the rules are a little bit different. Typically, it involves having a commercial invoice itemized with everything and quantities and values of what we're shipping. Depending on which countries it's going to, sometimes they require the serial numbers, like you were mentioning earlier, for the Carnet.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to know the country of manufacture. So you have to say, this is made in China, this is made in Japan, this is made in the US, and so on. So custom rules vary, but you definitely want to look at that and make sure that you're following all of that. Otherwise, it could get held up in customs and become your worst nightmare.
Now, I know if you are a traveler departing from America, there's another form you can get called a 4455, which is like a itemized itinerary of your travel equipment. That could be another option in cases where maybe you don't want to apply for the Carnet and go through the whole process, but you want some documentation to support what you're traveling with. So that's another form to look for, is the 4455.
Yeah. The other thing is when you're shipping things back out, you want to make sure that your commercial invoice is still valid, that you haven't changed anything. That could lead to some problems where people think you're importing and exporting things illegally. So you want to make sure everything's on the up and up, because the last thing you need is delays or who knows. So MkII was asking, would the AVIO capture card survive a soft case through the airport luggage check-in? That would be an interesting test. I think we've proven by throwing it off a roof with no case and still working that probably isn't an issue. Yeah, and Stefan's throwing some tips in here. You know, good thing is to have obviously ownership things, customs taxes, all those sorts of various different pieces, especially when you're returning from Asia or anywhere like that, where a lot of, let's be honest, a lot of AV gear is manufactured. So you want to make sure that you have all the appropriate paperwork to show that you aren't importing and exporting.
Another tip that I would give is to protect yourself from theft as well. And I have a friend who's been sort of doing some world travel and some travel vlogging. And you know, one of the tips that he gave me was to not always make it super obvious that you have expensive equipment with you. So if there's ways that you can, for example, with the backpack we showed before, certain camera backpacks are very obviously camera backpacks. Other ones are maybe less obvious as being containing equipment. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're doing international travel and you're going to be, I don't know, backpacking, or you're going to be taking a lot of trains and places where you're going to be on public transit, having a bag that is more nondescript, like don't have a giant Canon camera label right on the front of your bag, because people know there's an expensive camera in there. It's incentivizing them to steal it from you. So whenever you can, stealth mode your equipment. That's another good tip as well.
So Colin Wilcox had a great question he just posted here. He mentioned that he joined late, so he might have missed this. He says, don't you need a Carnet? I thought if you don't have one, you'd get dinged for duty and taxes. So maybe you can address that again.
Yeah, so what I would say is that, obviously look, you can get some advice from your local Carnet office. You look it up, Google it. But my sort of rule of thumb is under $10,000, at least here in Canada.
You can probably claim it's personal equipment.
Yeah, exactly. If I'm traveling with my DSLR and a couple lenses, I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
There's no need for a Carnet.
That's just your vacation photos.
Exactly. If I'm traveling with a Red and some cine lenses and perhaps
$25,000 worth of camera gear.
Yeah. If I have over $10,000 worth of equipment, that's when I either ship it to myself at the destination, rent it, which is probably my best recommendation, is rent it at the location, or get the Carnet. Now the thing about the Carnet is you're paying the bond, so you're paying a percentage of the value, and you might not get that bond back for like a year. So there is obviously a cost attached to doing the Carnet. So that's again when it might make sense to rent at your destination.
Yeah, Colin was just following up saying he had to travel to Belgium and had a video switcher with him, but was never asked about the Carnet. And that's probably just a value thing. I think like many things in this sort of world when it comes to moving internationally with equipment, sometimes it's totally going to depend on the customs agent you're coming across, the answers you give them as to why you're coming through. For us, at least for me, my primary reason for traveling internationally is usually trade shows. And as soon as I walk up, I say, listen, I'm attending this show. Right away, whether it's an American customs agent or a Dutch customs agent in the Netherlands, right away, they've seen 1,000 people that day with the exact same answer, and they just stamp, have a nice day.
Yeah.
Because they know that that's a thing that's happening. It's a big event. There's 60,000 people about to come into the city, and they're just going to stamp and go.
Yeah. Another thing you can do is if you are, doing professional work on your travel, is have a travel letter with you. So have a document from, an executive at your company or your client that states exactly what the purpose of your travel is. And there are of course rules about where you can work. So you want to make sure you have that sorted out.
Always look at visas depending on the country you're going to and where you're coming from.
Now I know I've done shoots in the U.S. where my client is a Canadian company and I'm being paid in Canadian dollars in Canada, but we're still shooting something in the U.S. That's fine. There's no issue there, but you might want to have some documentation to support that, which can be a good idea.
I think the main thing there is definitely pay attention to those rules. I think as Canadians, we're actually pretty lucky. We can move to a lot of countries in the world without work visas, more than a lot of others, and so we're kind of lucky in that way. Going to Europe is no issue for us. It's not a big deal for us to do that very temporarily. So that's an advantage. But depending on where you're from and the country you're going to, you definitely want to check on those rules and make sure that you have the appropriate visa status in order to do that. Some countries, it's a long application process, so plan ahead and look that up and make sure that you understand that.
So I think we should probably wrap up for today. If you have any final questions, throw them in chat. If we can't get to them now, we'll get to them after the show.
For sure.
Always check up on us on the Epiphan forum. This was episode 66.
66.
Episode 67, we'll be back again next week. I know one of the things that we're really excited about now is that Pearl Mini is shipping. We've actually moved the ping pong table here, but this was our shipping area last week. We had hundreds of Pearl Minis around here. Now those are all on their way to customers, so if you ordered one, you should probably have it on your way very soon. So thank you for that. Is there anything else we want to add?
Obviously, the webinar, we mentioned that off the top. July 11th, we're doing that webinar. Just go to the website, epiphan.com. You should see the pop-up to sign up for that webinar. Again, we're going to be talking about how to build a fail-proof studio. So that'll be great. Do we have a topic for next week?
I think we're still looking for a topic for next week. So if you guys have anything that you want us to talk about on the show next week, let us know.
Comments, email, live@epiphan.com, any of those ways to reach out to us, and we'd love to hear from you.
That being said, should we call it a week?
we'll call it a week. We have a Pearl Mini launch party to get to, so maybe we'll finish up with some ping pong.
Yeah.
And then go have ourselves a little bit of a party. So thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you next time, and I'm sure we'll have some more interesting topics in the world of live streaming and what we can do to help you achieve success in that. So thanks everyone. See you later.
Bye-bye.